Okay. The January 17th meeting of the Litchfield Planning Board. Would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Kate Stevens will not be in attendance tonight, so I will start with the roll call of members. Michael Proto, Chair.
Ron Stevens, member.
Kimberly Queenan, Selectman's Rep.
Sam Terrell, member.
James Buffetti, member.
Welcome, everybody. And we have with us this evening Jay Monkara from NRPC. Welcome. And Luke Caron, our engineer of the town. Welcome. Okay. First off, are there any public input on non-agenda items not on the agenda for this evening that people would wish to comment on? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to close public input on non-agenda items. And I'm actually going to go just a bit out of order here. I'm going to do number 2 first, which is the site plan review for expansion at Olson's Mobile Home Park for 55 units of residential manufactured homes known as Litchfield Estates in the Southern Commercial District. At 1, Lot 32, 13 Charles Bancroft Highway. Owner Olson MHP LLC. This project is continued from the December 20th, 2022 meeting. If aforementioned application is accepted, notice is hereby extended to application, approval, consideration, and/or continuations to a date certain as required. Is the applicant here?
We are here.
Okay, and it's just you tonight, correct?
It is just me this evening.
Okay. So I'm sure, as most of you recall, there was an email that went around about a site walk that didn't happen because there was not notice given for that to take place. So if you want, you can actually come to the front and introduce yourself to the board. So I think, first off this evening, is maybe we can decide if we still want to do a site walk and when do we want to do it. And probably maybe next weekend, possible, if the applicant so desires.
Thank you.
So if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Chad Brannon. I'm a civil engineer with Fieldstone Land Consultants, and I'll be representing the owner and applicant this evening.
You're going to lose your...
Nice catch.
That's from Kate. That's a message from Kate.
Pretty good. It's quick. Yeah.
What happens when you borrow somebody's easel?
You want to send that? I'm going to ask him. So.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. We're willing to do a site walk if the board, still feels that's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
We have made some progress on the plan since the last meeting. We unfortunately made a submission today to Mr. Caron addressing his engineering review comments. We had kind of held off in hopes that we could maybe absorb any comments that we received from the board at the site walk, but at the same time, because we were not able to perform that walk, we felt it would be productive to at least make that submission and work through Mr. Caron's comments, which we had no issues with. A lot of really good comments, so I don't think it's prudent to present new plans this evening necessarily, but I just wanted to share that we have made those revisions and we're looking forward to moving the project forward.
Okay, great. Now, Jay, I think you received those today, my understanding?
Received them this afternoon. I have not had a chance to
so
look at
did
them yet.
Lou, is my understanding.
Yes.
So you need the opportunity to review those, so we can certainly do that. Would you be amenable to the board doing a site walk maybe next Saturday, or what's your availability, I guess, in terms of...
Well, our goal is to
do
make
it.
ourselves as available as possible so that we can hopefully, accomplish the site walk and then move this along. I can share that since the last meeting, the brand-new septic system is operational. We received the operational approval from DES. So the pump station is installed, the sewer force main is installed, and the field out in the back is installed. It's been inspected by the state. We've received operational approval. So phase 2 of that install is pretty significant, which consists of replacing the septic tanks for each of the existing 47 mobile homes and then the conveyance system. And quite honestly, our client cannot proceed with that until we get an approval, for this project, because it's wrapped into the same loan in order to make the work move forward. What I can tell you is that is actively under review at the state, meaning the part 2 of that. The next thing that we also have agreed to do with DES is to decommission that sewage lagoon, since that's no longer active and live. We talked about a lot of these details at the last meeting, but just wanted to give you an update as to what's happened since then. So getting back to the site walk, our goal is to move this as long as expeditiously as possible. So we are available when the board is to do that. If it's this coming Saturday, that's great. We'd be happy to to walk people around at that time.
Would the board be available this coming Saturday if you wanted to do that?
Yes.
Does that work for everybody?
The afternoon,
The afternoon?
Yeah.
Would the afternoon be okay?
like after 1 or noon
After
or
1?
something, yeah. Does that
I mean,
work?
Yeah,
does that
I mean-
work for you? I just want-
Our preference would be morning, if at all possible, but
What about you,
if we
Jay?
have to do it in the afternoon,
I
that's
could do
fine.
morning, afternoon would be tough for me.
Yeah, I can't
but-
do morning, okay. But that's okay.
Can
as long as
everyone
you
else
have a
do
quorum.
morning? Yeah, okay. So maybe 10 o'clock work?
That's fine.
Jay, does that work with you? Okay. So we will hold the site walk for the Olson's Bowl Park on January 21st, which is this coming Saturday at 10 o'clock. Okay. Very good. I know that there's an issue with a waiver. They're looking for a waiver action. I'm gonna put that on hold for now until after the site walk. And what are we planning on doing? When do you think you would be able to meet with the board again? I guess is my question. If to have another meeting. Our next meeting isn't till February.
And we are doing Thoreau on the 7th.
Yes, so that is a big project.
So
We would obviously like to be heard on the 7th, just because time is really critical with this project. But
I just don't know. I mean, it is, that is another, it's a substantial application. That's the only thing.
21st would be the next meeting after that.
I think probably that would be better for us. I'm just, at least it gives you an opportunity to focus on your project. So, I mean, what does everybody think? 21st work?
I'm happy to do the 21st, but I feel for Chad here.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to move it along as fast as we can. If there's are there any other options we have to do it sooner?
I mean, I'm just saying that's going to be quite a bit for.
I mean, the next
7th.
meeting is the 7th, but we do have Thoreau that
Yeah.
night, so
That's
that's
a
up to
big
the
project.
board, but that's,
So, but I mean, it's up to you guys. What do you want to do?
I mean, I will say, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind me speaking, we did have an opportunity to go through, the first engineering review. As I stated at the last meeting, we had no issues with any of the comments. Frankly, in a lot of communities, we often will address engineering reviews as a condition of approval, and I'm not suggesting that we're seeking that tonight, because I know the board wants to go forward with a site walk, but the goal would be, my goal anyways, is to answer as many questions that the board has this evening. And my hope is that we could wrap things up after we do a site walk, so maybe we wouldn't be taking up so much time on your first meeting in February, if at all possible. And certainly respect everybody here volunteering their time on a planning board. without, my job is to push a little bit, so I'm hopeful that we might be in a position where we could maybe be ruling on the project from a conditional approval standpoint in February.
Okay.
And the other option, obviously, is to schedule a special meeting, but that's up to the board.
I don't think that February 7th date is practical, given,
Well, yeah.
I mean, it's just.
Well,
I wish
given
it
that
was.
Jay has to review the stuff and so does Lou, I mean, plus if we're going to have the other project, I mean, it is kind of tough. So I think what we're going to do, I think what I would recommend is we do the 21st of February for the site plan application for Olson's. And we'll schedule it for the 21st, 7 p.m. here in Town Hall. So that would be to continue to a date and time certain. And at that time, we'll address the waiver, we'll address all of the issues that the applicant has, and we'll probably, we'll see where we go from there at that point.
And if that's okay with you, and certainly I think Lou and I can work with you to make, to do everything that we can to get the plans, as ready as possible and everything addressed.
That sounds great. Yeah.
Good. All right, so with that said, if we're going to continue it, I need a motion to continue it to February 21st.
So moved.
James has made a motion to continue it to February 21st. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by James. I'm sorry, by Ron. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion to move to February 21st for Olson's, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, abstained, motion passes 5-0-0. So we will see you on the 21st
Okay.
of February for the meeting.
So there wasn't anything that you wanted to, I know at the last meeting, and I know you just voted to continue the project, but there was some discussion about going over some issues that the board doesn't want to take up any of those.
There was
this
a
evening?
question, I think Kate had a question, right? She had a question about signage.
If there was going to be a sign out front,
Is
yeah.
there going to be a sign out front where the, when you come into the entrance to the,
They do want to have a sign out front, but that's going to require some zoning relief, I think, because the property is so narrow along that front portion. So their goal is to have a sign. We haven't included it in this application, just because when we reviewed that with Joan at the time, she said that was going to require some zoning relief. So we're handling that separately for this project. But the goal is to somehow fit a sign, out front on the end of Darlene Lane.
does the board have any other further questions for the applicant this evening? Hello, Lou.
As we were finishing the last public meeting, the one thing that was brought to my attention when they were discussing waivers, that the plan was being handled as a subdivision and not a site plan.
Oh, yes.
Okay, when I did my review, I assumed it was a site plan. So there was no comments I had regarding subdivision regulations because I didn't think they applied. And there were some waivers, you really need to look at all that's required under the subdivision regulations, including engineering specifications, as far as design, there's a whole chart, and also drainage. Because under the subdivision regulations, it requires concrete pipe and you're putting in plastic
Right.
pipe.
And I appreciate you bringing that up, Lou, because there was some confusion in how the application is filed. So initially, we filed it as a site plan. Practically, when I look at this project, I think it falls more into a site plan type design from an engineering standpoint. Certainly from a leasing standpoint and, kind of creating those lease lots, I understand the subdivision component. We did take a look at the roadway standards under the subdivision regulations. I mean, they have a 45 mile an hour, I think, speed limit design. And we're certainly not meeting any of those horizontal curve criteria. So maybe we have to look at some additional waivers for pipe materials and horizontal, curves. I think that if you look at the layout, and I appreciate the dialogue if there's any feedback that the board could share tonight, but When you look at the layout, I mean, we're creating a number of stopping conditions, but certainly some of the radiuses are tighter than a normal subdivision street would be, where you're kind of encouraging a little bit more speed. Inside a mobile home park, generally, I mean, the desired speed is very low, in the vicinity of, 15 to 20 miles an hour, typically. So we have designed it to that standard. So I think in light of that, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because that was actually a question that I wanted to raise this evening was, should we be seeking waivers for road design? And if, with the understanding that this is a mobile home park, does it necessarily fit in the subdivision or the site plan as it relates to that? Because you're 100% right. It depends on how we would evaluate, whether we need some relief for materials. And, we've even talked about that with Pennachuck Water, because they've just recently given us the authority to use plastic pipe versus ductile iron in this project once we get beyond the metering station, which is, there's some savings there.
Well, it's a subdivision by definition, so that's the standard.
Okay.
So I would say, to Lou's point, take a look, and we can certainly help you to figure out the waivers that you need, and then you could submit those on the one or more waiver forms, our standard waiver form.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we'll talk about that.
I just want to make sure
No.
when you look at it, to get them all, so you don't find yourself with another month delay or something.
And you mentioned that at the conclusion of the last meeting, because I think you caught on to, it being a subdivision. So I appreciate you bringing that up again. Absolutely.
Good question.
And as I mentioned to you as we were leaving at that last meeting, that the piece of road between the existing Darlene and the brand-new road really needs to have a center line alignment and everything else.
That's
Is it in here?
accomplished in the revised plans. We did that per
Okay.
your request. Yep.
Okay,
And we added a profile for that section.
good.
And basically removed all the pavement because there's nothing worth saving through there, and reconstructing that whole section. So that's detailed in that revised set as well.
Okay. Great. Right, anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will see you on the 21st of January for the site walk, and be back here on February 21st for the application.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on tonight's agenda is number 1, which was amending, which actually is a public hearing on 2 proposed zoning amendments. Item number 1, amending section 504, home occupations, to provide clear standards for all home occupations, to distinguish between home occupations that require planning board approval and those that do not require planning board approval, and to provide specific standards for family and adult daycare and firearms-related home businesses. And item number 2, which is amending section 1040.00, the demolition review ordinance, to make the ordinance applicable to buildings that are 60 years old or older, rather than to buildings built prior to 1960. Notice tonight is hereby given in accordance with New Hampshire RSA section 675:7. Public hearing will be conducted to consider proposed amendments to the Town of Litchfield zoning ordinance, which I've just explained. Copies of the full text are available for public viewing purposes in the town hall offices during regular business hours. And folks are invited to appear in person or be represented by an agent or counsel to provide input to the planning board regarding the proposed amendments. And you are to address any written or comments to the planning board at planningboard@litchfieldnewhampshire.gov, and referencing the proposed zoning amendments. All written submissions will be included as part of the record. So this, I am officially open tonight, the public hearing on this. Jay, if you want to get us started with the first one on home occupations.
So item one, addressing home occupations, was really designed to do a few things. So first of all, it was to clarify the distinction between home occupations that require planning board approval and those that don't. That kind of exists today, but it's kind of unwritten and de facto. So that's a major change. And then in response to that, to put in place some requirements that are applicable to all home occupations. And then to provide some specific standards for a few different types of home occupations, specifically family childcare, adult daycare, and home occupations that involve the sales, service, or manufacturing of firearms. So just kind of running through them, very briefly. There's a few areas where we did have a lot of conversation. So just starting in subsection 504.01. This is general requirements for all home occupations. Most of the things that you see if you're looking at the draft are what's currently in our regulations, just under a different form. The significant change is really G, which limits the delivery of goods and materials to step vans and similar vehicles customarily associated with residential delivery. So that's to avoid large commercial vehicles in residential neighborhoods. And again, that was to all home occupations. And then I'm moving on to section 504.02. And this is home occupations that are permitted by right. And essentially what this is suggesting is that home occupations that are really not visible outside the home, that don't result in physical changes to the property, that are not customary in a residential neighborhood, these do not require planning board approval. People can simply do them. And there's a whole list of requirements. I won't necessarily go through those unless anybody wants me to. But essentially they all come back to that same point. There's no significant increase in traffic, there's no visitors, outside employees, et cetera. Next is section 504.03, and these are the home occupations that do require planning board approval. Kind of, once again, most of what you see in this section, and by the way, if you're looking at the text, language that's changed is all shown in bold. So new language is in bold italics, and anything that's to be removed is shown in strikeout. So as you can see, there are really very few changes to what we currently require. A couple of them, though, worth noting. Subsection 5. Once again, we had a fair amount of conversation around vehicles and vehicle size. So this limits business vehicles to nothing greater than 26,000 pounds. So essentially, that's prohibiting larger commercial vehicles. Section 504.04 is entirely new, and that is a section that addresses family child care facilities as home occupations. Those are defined consistently with the state requirements, so that is essentially 6 children or fewer, not including those related. And most of these requirements are fairly straightforward. Outdoor play areas have to be fenced or screened, and the planning board has some discretion in looking at potential impacts of the property. Some of the biggest concerns around daycare facilities are usually around parking, pickup, and drop-off, that level of activity. So the board wants to ensure that those are adequately addressed. And there are licensing requirements, state licensing requirements, and that's something that the board would want to make sure exist, that they do are licensed. And for the most part, these are regulations that are designed to protect the neighborhood. Next is section 504.05, and this is very, very similar. Most of the requirements are really the same or almost the same as the ones you find for family daycare, and these address adult daycare as home occupations. There are just some differences in state requirements and licensing requirements. Then moving on is section 504.06, And this relates to firearms sales, service, and manufacturing as a home occupation. And there was a fair amount of conversation around this as well. And the primary concern here is really safety, making sure that any businesses that are handling firearms are doing so in a safe manner. So those include, one, not having drop-by retail sales. So retail sales have to be by appointment. There are no wholesale sales on site. And no exterior signage, no basically signs, which you don't want. What we're trying to avoid is people dropping by looking for firearms, that it should be more controlled. And that the applicants can demonstrate that they have adequate security. Advertising is limited, particularly when it comes to the address. And then some of the concerns that we've heard as these facilities are proposed, just to clarify that there are no firing ranges on the property, so there won't be any discharge of weapons associated, with the business. So essentially, again, I didn't read through all of them. I certainly could, but that was really the essence. It's to allow, continue to allow these uses, but to make sure that there are restrictions in place or regulations in place that would promote public safety. And then there's section 504.07, and this is a section that addresses, this is an entirely new section, and these are prohibited uses that would be prohibited, under any circumstance for home occupations. Some of these are, almost would probably seem intuitive, but they're not currently stated. No use would be permitted that generates or stores or uses regulated hazardous substances, as an example. And again, that's probably not surprising, but it's certainly worth stating. And then certain other businesses are also not permitted as a home occupation: motor vehicle and machinery service, maintenance, repair, and painting; motor vehicle, machinery, and sales; medical, dental, or veterinary practice; kennels; and the manufacturing of firewood. The following section deals with procedure. That is unchanged. And then there is a existing provision on in the ordinance on existing home occupations, basically, that are non-conforming, allowing them to legalize. We've changed the date from March 10 we've changed the date for a non-conforming home occupation that existed, it previously existed prior to March 10, 1981, I should say currently, and that would change to March 14, 2023, obviously to reflect the changes in the ordinance. So that's for existing non-conforming, and then there's a section on existing illegal that allows them to legalize. Same thing, we changed the dates. So beyond that, that's really kind of a quick snapshot of changes, but I could certainly go into more detail on any of the changes that are proposed.
Okay. Very good. Does anybody have any questions? I think it looks very good. I think we tried to make it consistent with each one.
Yeah.
In terms of, I see that was done. Okay. Since this is a public hearing, I am going to open it up to public comment. If there's anyone here from the public tonight who has any questions or concerns about this particular proposed zoning amendment for warrant article regarding to home occupations, feel free to come forward, state your name and address for the record. And
I know Win Van Morick. I asked him to come here tonight because he does work in the field of guns, selling them along that line, training. I still have some confusion here, and I respect the board here, and I understand Jay is a lawyer, you're a lawyer, and you're a lawyer, but I just want to make sure that I don't see an overreach happening, either at the Fed, state, or local level, or the other direction. And I also want to make sure any decision we make doesn't have a future lawsuit against the town. So I asked him to do some research just to bring to us, and then I want to hear feedback just to make sure, because I need an education moment here to understand before I vote on anything. So
Okay.
you can come on up. When you're gonna come up? You have to come up.
Well, before I come up, everybody, do we have any of the FFLs in town willing to stand up and speak for their own damn rights?
Okay, calm down. I don't even know what an FFL is. So.
Hi, Winter Yard, 2 Newstead Street. Let me start off by saying, I'm not an American, and I understand your rights better than most people. Let me start off by saying that this is a right which was put into the United States Constitution, adopted in 1791. The Second Amendment to the Constitution says that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That means nothing can stop it. The United States federal government has spoken on this many times. The New Hampshire state government has spoken on this many times. Examples of this. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 gives the constitutional power to the United States Congress to declare war. In addition to that, it also allows them to grant powers of marque and reprisal, which is for private people to own, at that time, battleships, cannons, weapons of any and all sort, and to be licensed to go into foreign waters, capture foreign ships, bring them back to the United States and sell them. During the War of 1812, over 1,000 British ships were brought back to the United States. Nobody said anything. It was asked of Hamilton, is this a legal thing to do? He, in effect, wrote back in one of the Federalist Papers, yes, of course, that is the whole point of the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. Furthermore, at that time, at least 2 private organizations were set up in the United States, one in Connecticut, one in Vermont. Vermont, obviously, to patrol Lake Champlain against the British, to purchase and arm warships and cannon to patrol these ships and to protect United States citizens and property. Let's go and take a look at some of the things that the United States government has said. Most recently, in June 23rd, 2022, they struck down a New York law that required people to show a specific need to carry a firearm. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote that gun laws must now be judged based on text, history, and tradition of the United States Second Amendment. What did the amendment mean to the founders? Where did they think the right to bear arms originated, and how did they apply? As I stated at the beginning of the United States Constitution, these laws are self-evident, given by God. They're not given by man. Man has no right to limit these things. The United States Supreme Court said that you cannot limit these rights. Period. End of sentence. In 2008, they overruled laws in Washington, D.C., saying that you could not own guns. That was the Heller decision, held 5-4, that people are allowed to own guns in their own home or anywhere else. In 2007, the U.S. Supreme Court said, and this is something which is very germane to part of this discussion here, is that the police do not have a constitutional duty to protect a person or property from harm. The police, as much as we like them, are nothing more than historians. They are there to come in after the fact and write up a letter about what happened. They do not have to insert themselves into a place where they feel that they are in danger. The only people who are responsible for keeping you safe is you. The only way that you can do that in a reasonable fashion is to have a non-disparity of strength between you and someone else. An old quote, was God made all men equal, or God made all men, equal, but Samuel Colt made them the same, The whole point of firearms is to remove the disparity between people. If a strong male wishes to attack a weak female, the only way that that's going to be stopped is with a firearm. How did we get to this point? It is by the United States Congress overstepping the Commerce Clause, which is in Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, which gives the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations, several states, and Indian tribes. Why did they do this? Because they said that no state was capable of supporting or limiting the use of firearms or the sale of firearms or the movement of firearms within their own states or between states. In the United States versus Alfonso Lopez, U.S. 14 or 549 in the United States, it was said that since the first case in 1937, the U.S. Congress has exceeded its power to legislate under the Common Clause. What specifically was brought up was that someone brought a handgun near a school within 1,000 yards, which was the law at the time, and the Congress or the Supreme Court said that the U.S. government does not have the right to regulate that at all. If we go into New Hampshire's, what do we talk about the New Hampshire laws? We talked about the federal laws saying that you cannot do this stuff. The last law that I mentioned in 2022 is seen as a law which is probably going to get rid of most of the firearm laws on the books in the United States. Unfortunately, they're going to have to go through the normal court process, but everything up to and including the dissolution of the ATF is probably going to happen unless someone comes in and tries another constitutional amendment to the United States. We have then at the New Hampshire level that you cannot preempt state laws. If you try to restrict the sales of guns in Litchfield, you will be preempting state laws. What kind of laws are these? Chris Sununu signed a bill, House Bill 1178, that prevented anybody from trying to enforce federal laws which are in contradiction of New Hampshire state laws, which go against sales, carrying, either concealed or open carrying of guns. New Hampshire has actually no laws on the books which restrict at any age which a person may possess and carry firearms. On June 2, 2016, the New Hampshire State Supreme Court in Bach versus the New Hampshire Department of Safety said that you cannot impose a law on concealed carry or requiring non-residents to have a permit to carry in the state. Since 2017, when a state law was passed that said that we have now constitutional carry, which means you are not required to have a permit to carry a gun openly or concealed in the state of New Hampshire. There is further law that says that if you wish to pull a gun out to stop a perceived threat, which is typically called criminal brandishing, that also is allowed. It is no longer required that it has to be done inside of your house or within the curtilage of your house. There are no rules in the state that say that. There are rules in the state that says that firearm sales, manufacturing, servicing, and all that kind of stuff is a legal occupation. You cannot stop it. If we wish to look at what did our founding fathers have to say about this, we can go to Thomas Jefferson. No free man shall ever be disbarred the use of firearms. That goes to what Clarence Thomas was saying. What are the historical meanings of what they were saying? We have another one from Thomas Jefferson. What country can preserve its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that the people reserve the right to preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. If you think it's only him, then let's talk about Samuel Adams at the Constitutional Convention. The Constitution shall never be construed to prevent the people of the United States who are peaceable citizens from keeping their own arms. Okay, having said that, some other things were brought up. We wish to limit the right of people to have a business in their house. There's no laws on the state or in the state that allow you to have a limiting of rights in that place. If you wish to have a job, you can have a job. If you wish to have signs, as was pointed out to me by the building inspector of the town, everybody in town is allowed to have a 2-foot by 2-foot sign on their property displaying their home business. That's a Litchfield law. Are you going to contradict that law now? I don't think so. Let's talk about other things which have happened here locally in town. Several of us will remember that a few years ago we had an issue where 48 houses were broken into by a couple of kids who were looking to feed their drug habit. The police were not capable of stopping them. The only reason that they were stopped is because they backed themselves into the back corner of a garage and someone held them there while the police showed up. in the middle of all of this, I had some of these people try to break into my house. My house. Not someone else's. I had to pull out a gun and defend my family. Are you going to try to tell me that I'm not going to be able to do that? And if I want to start up a business, are you going to tell me that I'm not going to be able to start up a business for doing this? You have no right to make these laws. It is not in the spirit of the United States Constitution. It is not in the spirit of the United States history to try to limit anything related to firearms or guns in this country. I'm sorry if I'm passionate about this, but my history is that my family went through World War II. I lost a lot of members who were murdered by the Nazis in Holland because they said, oh, we're Dutch, we remain neutral in World War I, and if we say we're going to be neutral again, then the Nazis aren't going to come and take care of us, right? Well, the Nazis rolled right through Holland and they murdered a number of my family. Just like a salmon says, hey, I'm not going to bother that bear, but the bear is still going to eat that salmon. What did the salmon do? Nothing. But yet it was still eaten. In the same way, people have the right to protect themselves, whether there is an actual or a perceived threat of violence upon them or their person. So long as they do not infringe on anybody else's natural or constitutional rights, they are free to do as they want. That is the purpose of the United States Constitution, to do as you darn well please. Anything else is a violation and stands against the principles under which this country was founded. Thus endeth my sermon.
Okay.
So
Not that I feel strongly
no,
about
I
this,
still
mind
want to
you.
understand. You think the ATF is violating the commerce, or is
No.
using the commerce?
I think that the ATF has standard rules that they put forward that says if you are going to be an FFL, there are certain rules that you must follow. These rules include record keeping, reporting, and safety and maintenance of protective environments to make sure that the guns are not removed illegally from the premises. So if someone wants to have an FFL, they need to have and show that they are capable of maintaining these firearms in a safe manner, that they cannot be easily broken into and easily stolen. That's federal law. By you trying to put these laws in place to stop that, you are preempting state law and federal law, which you are not allowed to do.
Because you're saying the state law, I just need to understand this. The ATF, or whoever, already looked at these offices, looked at these home offices and gave them some kind of a certificate, right? And then you're saying New Hampshire doesn't have to recognize the federal law.
New Hampshire does not have to.
And
They
it
can
hasn't.
choose to do so if they would like.
So so you're saying, we're going to have lawyers here, New Hampshire has to allow you to sell, buy, defend yourself, all of this from a business perspective? You have to do
And
it
from a personal protection, right.
But I just want to make sure we're not infringing on anybody's right to have any type of business that New Hampshire says we can have, number one.
Putting rules in place now by the state or by the town of Litchfield would preempt state laws and federal laws and open the town of Litchfield to basically lawsuits. There would be assuming responsibility and liability for something that they have no right to adjudicate or to put laws in place for.
So my fear at the beginning was the overreach was from Litchfield overreaching what the federal level said. And you're saying the federal level maybe disappear, I don't know about how that's going to work, but you're saying New Hampshire has precedence over the federal, right? Is that what you're just saying?
What I'm saying is that there's federal law in place, there is state law in place, and for Litchfield to try to preempt that is not the right thing to do. New Hampshire has additional rules in place. For example, should the federal law pass any laws which are not in keeping with the spirit of the New Hampshire Constitution or their laws there, that if anybody federal tries to enforce that, they are liable for arrest by any New Hampshire peace officer and subject to a Class B misdemeanor. That is New Hampshire law. New Hampshire does not tolerate this sort of thing. everything that they do, including the United States, Constitution. New Hampshire is one of the few states that actually says it is the duty of the state to remove themselves from the United States should the United States fail to live up to the spirit of what was intended.
Okay, so I think we're approaching this from a protection point of view, which is good, but I still want to approach it from a commerce, I want to make sure we're not infringing on, what are you calling these, FFLs? What are you calling them?
FFL, a federal firearm licensee.
So once they receive that, I want to make sure we're not infringing on their rights. That's my only question.
You have, yes.
And it sounds like we are, if we
So is
do some of these laws, that we want to have them not be able to have a sign, not be able to have people come and do business at their residence,
People
or
may not like it,
manufacture them
but
on
it is the
site,
law.
or wasn't there one where they had to just pick it up and no wholesale or something? I just want to make sure we're not infringing. That's why I was asking legally. I don't know the answer to this.
Yeah, and I can't say I have expertise in the Second Amendment rights. The reason why these were proposed is because we have had home occupation approval requests from licensees, because as a condition of their license, they were required to come and get town approval for home occupation. So they were required as a condition in order to get their license, they had to come to the town and get approval. The suggestion seems to be that while they can be required to come to the town to get approval, the town can't impose any kind of requirement or regulation. In other words, I think what you're saying is that the town must approve any application that it receives and cannot impose any restrictions or requirements whatsoever.
Within reason. There are certain rules as listed by the Federal Firearms Act where certain things can be done. For example, you cannot set up within a certain distance of schools. Those are considered reasonable. I don't consider them reasonable, but there you go. They're federal laws. As long as they adhere to the federal laws, there is no reason that they should be prevented from starting their own business.
So are there specific requirements that are proposed in this amendment that you think are concerning?
Well, the fact that you're saying that we wish to impose certain laws on them, including no signage, preventing them from only having pickups, preventing them from not being able to sell multiple firearms, all of those sound like limitations of someone's ability to do business.
Do they, and again, I want to hear from the lawyers, but does that mean that we have a general where they can just get approval, right? We have a general bucket here where they don't need planning board approval.
Well, it's by right.
Well, it is, yeah. by
Right, there are types of
So
home
there is a bucket
occupations
here
that don't
for that,
require
if we
planning board
decide to
approval, right.
stick that there. So,
Those have no external,
right,
and they have no customers coming to the home.
Yeah, I know.
They have
I
no
saw
other
that.
employees, they
Yeah.
have no sign.
I know.
So,
And it actually explicitly said nothing about, you said take out the firearms, I thought, on the last bullet or something, yeah.
Right.
And again, I want to get the right answer here, so when I see child care and adult care having to satisfy federal and state, licensing and all that, that's fine. But I didn't see anything on the firearms part. They should get, I don't know if it's ATF or whoever gives this, who gives this certificate for the home?
Yeah, it's number 8. It says the applicant shall demonstrate compliance with all applicable state and federal laws.
Does it say that for the guns as
Yes.
well?
Yes, it's
Okay,
in
I didn't see, I must have been, okay, thank you, because I saw it for like I said, the two care centers, type of cares. So again, I don't understand the federal law 100%. Then we have a state law, then we have a local law. And usually on the planning board, we adhere to the state and we adhere to the federal all the time. We have a chain of command that we follow. So talking about now how New Hampshire kind of broke away and can ignore the federal on some level, but, I'm just, now, so my point is maybe we just have to adhere to the New Hampshire law. But it sounds like it's wide open from what he's saying. Not wide
New
open,
Hampshire?
it still has to have some fed, but,
New Hampshire stated that they will play along with the federal laws as long as they see fit to do so. Should New Hampshire decide to exercise its state's rights over the federal system, then they will do so as they please.
except for the supremacy clause,
except for the supremacy clause,
which is a big exception.
which is a big exception. But then we fall into the issue of overreach.
But the supremacy clause is in the U.S. Constitution. So that can't be overreach. It's in the U.S. Constitution, as is the Second Amendment, but it's in the U.S. Constitution.
That is
Right?
correct.
You can't ignore certain parts of the Constitution to pursue an argument.
I would agree with that statement, but the general clause under which these people try to make these rules is under the Interstate Commerce Clause, and they use that as their umbrella way to mask all kinds of foolishness where they should not be imposing themselves, and they hide it under the Supremacy Clause. If we would like to have a discussion of, con law, I'm all for it. I'd love to do that, but I don't think that this is necessarily the place or the time to do that.
I don't disagree at all.
Okay, so what's the law?
Well, here's what I think. I think that, we're at a time in history where this issue is extraordinarily divisive. It's hard to have a rational conversation about this because it's a gut emotional discussion, which is not helpful and divisive. I think we just scrap the whole thing and just say, this is not the time to address this issue in Litchfield. Litchfield is not ready to deal with this issue. When they're ready, then we should take it up again. But right now, my opinion is scrap it and just leave it status quo, which they still have to come to the board. So it doesn't get what you want, but I don't think that it does anybody any good to put on the ballot a highly divisive issue that separates people by political ideologies when that's really not what we should be about. We should be about bringing people together, and this isn't doing that. So as far as I'm concerned, this thing can just die where it is. It doesn't go on the ballot, and let's revisit it another year.
I second. You second that? Okay. Did legal have an opportunity to review this, Jay? Or?
Yes, we didn't get
Did
comments
they-
back,
did-
but
What were their comments? I'm just
they
curious.
didn't provide comments.
They didn't provide comments. Okay.
So, and just for the record, I happen to think that this is perfectly fine. I think, if you followed that argument, there would be no zoning that would be permitted on a local level. No zoning whatsoever. And the reality is that cities and towns can make decisions, zoning decisions about what their town looks like and what businesses can be in what sections. That's what we do here. So if you say that we can't do that, then we should just all go home. I'd be happy to submit my resignation tonight and say, I am wasting my time here, because that's what we do all the time. We just went through the exercise of looking at where we want to put businesses in the northern commercial district. All right? Mm-hmm. That's limited to the northern commercial district and the southern commercial district. But because what we're saying is we don't want this business to be located in the center of Charles Bancroft. It's a zoning, it's an appropriate zoning function that has been affirmed over and over again by the courts. Cities and towns can do that with some limitations. I think this is actually perfectly fine. And it took a lot for me to even support this, but I could support this, but not support it in this environment. This is just not conducive to just a good civic life in Litchfield. And what I see is just a lot of drama centered around this election that is just not healthy. It's just not healthy. So if you want a motion, Mr. Chair, I made a motion and Ron seconded it, but,
Yeah.
but basically.
You're going to make that
And the
informal
motion would be not to move the amendment
Not
forward.
to move. Okay, so that's the motion, and you're going to second that? Is there any further discussion?
Is that for the child care and the daycare?
It's the whole,
The whole,
The whole thing.
Just
whole
have people look at it. I want to make sure nobody's rights are infringed upon, and we don't have a lawsuit
But-
against the town.
But
I see your
But
argument.
raise that issue then every single time we talk about a zoning issue, because you've got to raise the exact same issue, Kim. If you're saying we can't do it here, then when can we do it? So every single time you need to say, is somebody's rights being infringed upon? Because if you follow that logically, we can't do anything here under that. Nor can the Board of Selectmen be doing anything that you guys do.
Yeah, I'm hearing this for the first time, so let me let that sink in.
Okay.
I agree with what you're saying. And that was one of my questions I had earlier, that what gives the planning board authority versus this? So I haven't thought that through yet. So I was still searching for the legal answer.
Cities and
because I didn't
towns
know.
only get authority from the state. And so there are laws that entrust planning boards with certain functions. Those issues have gone up on appeal over and over again. I read them every so often. Mike, you probably do as well. You see opinions from the New Hampshire Supreme Court talking about the power of the planning board and zoning boards to make reasonable restrictions in terms of how their town functions. That's been affirmed. It's authority granted by the state. We are only creatures of the state. The state tomorrow could decide that Litchfield ceases to exist and that Litchfield government has no authority, and that would be the end of it.
But that
authority comes from the state that says that we can do this, that we can have reasonable zoning regulations that controls how things happen in the town.
But you're saying that also came from the state about the firearms. The state's given us two messages. Probably given us more than that.
Well, but
I agree with you.
And I really don't want to have this, but the reality is we're not talking about the right of a person to possess a firearm. We're talking about where can you sell them. It's a different question. Where can you sell them? Can they sell them next to your house? If somebody wants to come in and they want to put not just a shop, but they want to put a factory, all right, to produce firearms next to your house, can they do it? And we say in this town, no. That there are certain limits of where you can do that. You can't put certain businesses in certain residential areas. And we can do that. But that's the question. People can buy a firearm according to federal and state law. They can go anywhere. Nothing in here restricts the right of a person to purchase and possess a firearm.
I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about them making a livelihood. It's for their business.
But there's nothing in the Constitution that says that you have a right to a livelihood to sell guns. There's nothing that says that. There's nothing that says that.
Right, and I mean, this really is. I mean, it's not an outright ban. It's basically looking at the business end of it, specifically because it is permitted. But if you look at home occupation, well, there are certain things that go with home occupation. You have to have certain criteria. That's what the planning board has to regulate. But what's the problem, I think, here is that this issue, particularly, as James said, is so divisive that it becomes a problem in itself, because then you're bringing up a lot of the political, you can make the constitutional argument. It doesn't sit well, and so I get that. So I guess maybe the best thing to do is to put this aside and continue what we've been doing as when we do home occupations and just regulate it that way. I mean, if that's what the board wants to do. And maybe if you want to revisit it, you can certainly do that, but maybe this isn't the time to do that. It sounds as though that's what I'm understanding. So I do have a motion. I do have a second. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
Can we still hear from our legal department on this?
Yeah, I'm surprised they made no comment at all.
Maybe it's because they didn't want to get into a second amendment.
Well,
Is our attorneys that we would reach out for something like this, or do you have your own attorney?
I can, no, we reached out to the town's attorney, but I could certainly make the request again if that's okay with
Just so we
Kim.
had some input.
Yeah.
It wouldn't make any difference to me for this vote. I'm sorry. it doesn't, it
Well, think
doesn't,
for the
it doesn't
future.
remove the divisiveness of the issue at a point in history that we're at. So, reasonable people, I guess, can differ. I just don't think this is a topic where we can have reasonable discussion. So,
So you're saying even in the future, we could not have this?
oh, and maybe in the future.
Just to
but-
see how they weighed
But it's
in.
not
That
gonna be
was my
this year.
question. What
Maybe
is
for next,
legal?
if we want to put it to them and think about it again next year or the year after.
I
and
just need
maybe when
legal
this country
input.
becomes a little more, divided, a little less divided, it might be a good time to do it. Just isn't the time to do it.
And I still would like to hear the legal input. I just want to
I'll,
make sure.
I can ask again.
Commerce, you can have a gun. I'm not worried about that. Just more the commerce side of it, that we're not infringing on their rights to run a business. Okay,
Right, but again.
I know. I
Think about it, think about
Yes,
it.
I
A
will.
business, any business that wants to move in next to you, I'm just using you but next to you, all right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the town can say only certain businesses,
Mm-hmm.
If somebody wanted to open a pawn shop next to you, you probably would have some concerns about that.
We have a sand pit for that.
Right?
But I know what you, I
or
understand your
if
argument.
they wanted to have a very loud automotive shop right next to you, you probably would have concerns about it because it would have impacts on your property values, on just how this town is perceived, and just the quality of your life. You have a right to peaceful enjoyment of your house. If there was something next to you that didn't give you peaceful enjoyment of your house, you have a property interest in that. You would be concerned about that.
That's why I wanted to understand the federal level. Do
But-
we
but-
have to bow down to them? That's why my question was, where do we?
But there's
bow?
nothing in the federal level that says that this town can't make decisions, zoning decisions. There's nothing in the federal level that would say that.
Looking at the state level. That's what I needed. I needed to understand that. That's all. Okay. To be continued.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, any further discussion? All right. All those in favor of vacating these zoning amendments, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Abstained? Motion passes 5-0-0. Okay. So, that one.
So the next is item 2, probably the less controversial demolition review ordinance. I don't know, Kim, do you want to speak to that one, or you want me to?
Yeah. Can somebody read it for me? Because I just closed my
Yeah, so
screen by
it's amend
accident.
section 1040 demolition review ordinance to make the ordinance applicable to buildings that are 60 years old or older, rather than to buildings built prior to 1960.
Yep, when we had this ordinance back in 2017, I think voted in 18, we had, we were thinking of anything between 50 and 60 years older, and that brought us to 1960 on, but we don't want a hard-coded year. We'd like to look at anything that's 50 or 60 years old. So that's, I think they changed the wording. I can't really see the screen behind you as much, but to allow
Sorry.
that, instead of remove the hard coding of 1960, and what did they say to replace it
60
with?
years, so the building was constructed 60 years or earlier at time of submission.
Right, so at the time they submit the permit, we'll look at the age and make sure if it's 60 years or older, then it would trigger the demolition ordinance.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on demolition ordinance?
You're gonna revert back to me?
Well, I don't want to infringe on anybody's rights.
I'm making sure people can make a living, that's all.
That's the question. Are we infringing on anybody's rights by doing this?
No, you're not, because they don't have to even show up to
Yes.
the demolition.
The process.
They have to be ahead of
That's
the
right.
process,
Thank you.
but they don't even have to show up to the hearing.
How can we do this?
So for the process right now, there is a time period. Now, an applicant has to wait
Right.
to get the approval, so.
I'm not
it's
comfortable
just
in,
changing which level,
it's not comfortable infringing on people's rights.
It was a balance.
so.
That whole ordinance was a balance. Like this one will
So
be.
there's a balancing test.
It's a
Is it?
balance. It
Okay.
was a balance.
I want to hear that balancing
We actually
test,
drew a
Kim.
balance on the
Yeah.
article.
Okay. Well, maybe we can have a larger discussion
We
about the
will have a
balancing
larger
test.
discussion.
Okay.
Are we scrapping that one too?
Well,
They're already waiting.
So how do we move this along, this one?
We needed a motion to move it to the ballot.
but before I do that, we should open it
Oh,
up
yeah,
to public hearing, because this is a public hearing, so I know we have this great discussion, and I get that, I like that. But we'll open it up to public hearing.
We have somebody ducking behind the
Anybody
computer.
calling
okay. Any members of the public? Okay.
Dialed in.
All right, well, seeing nobody coming up, so I'll close public hearing on this, and I will bring it back to the board. Jay, do you have any comments on this?
No, this is pretty straightforward.
Straightforward, okay.
Make a motion to move it forward for ballot consideration.
All right, I have a motion to move forward to ballot consideration by James. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Kim. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, abstained, motion passes 5-0-0. Okay. All right. Moving on.
Let me find my.
Let's see here. Discussion of the supremacy clause. No. No, that's been scratched out.
I have to find my notes about my meetings. Hold on.
Committee reports. Any reports
Not yet.
from any committees? Kim, do you have anything?
I do, as soon as I find my dates.
Okay.
There we go. All right, the next Board of Selectmen meeting is Monday, January 23rd, 6:30 PM, here at the Town Hall. Deliberative session for the school is Saturday, February 6th, 2 PM, I believe. No, let me take that back. For the school, I believe it's February 4th at 2 PM. It's a Saturday, double check the date. And for the town, it's Saturday, February 11th at 10 AM. Let's see. Voting is on March 14th at Campbell High School, 7 AM to 7 PM. After that, after the deliberative and the voting, the SIP committee should maybe regroup to see how the voters voted on things, right? So we're supposed to start the
Yep,
SIP committee
yep,
up
yep,
again.
yep.
And then NRPC, the next quarterly meeting is Wednesday, March 15th, 2023.
Okay. Very good. Conservation meeting. We did have a special non-public session meeting the other night about discussion of properties in town. The next meeting will be in February for the conservation, the first week in February. The Lower Merrimack Local River Advisory Committee has not met, although I think they did. There was comments that were reached out by NRPC for the Merrimack River Corridor Management Plan, and I think those have already that's been completed, so I think that part is done. And, yeah, well, as you said, CIP will revisit that after the voting. Okay, and that's all I have. Approval of the December 11th, 2022 site walk meeting minutes. Did everyone have an opportunity to take a look at those and want to approve
So
those?
can I ask a question? If there's not a quorum of the board, do you have to approve minutes?
If there's not a quorum, then we couldn't.
There are only 3 members present,
Oh, I see what
the
you're
site
saying.
walk.
Okay.
So, I mean, note the minutes, but there's not,
Yeah.
it wasn't an official meeting because
That's true.
there wasn't a quorum of the board present.
We can just characterize them as meeting notes, and
Such as
they
meeting
won't need to
notes
be
is okay.
approved,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. All right, so that'll be fine with that. The January 3rd, 2022 meeting minutes. Did anyone have an opportunity to look at those? Have any questions about those?
Motion to approve.
Okay, I have a motion by James. Do I have a second?
Second.
Do I have any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of approval of the January 3rd, 2022 minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, abstained? Aye. Oh, yes, motion passes 4-0-1. Any other business this evening? Kim, do you have anything?
I do not.
Okay, do you have anything?
Do not.
I actually,
I just want the
I have a
facts.
question for Jay. So, I guess I read somewhere, maybe on Facebook, that the development that we approved by Corning, the farm, the horse farm, that it's now going to be rental property as opposed to sale property. The developer has indicated that he can make more money renting it. So I guess my question is, because I know at the time it was proposed, it was anticipated those would be units for sale, because we asked how much they would be. And it does change the character somewhat if it's not, they're not owned or occupied, but they're rental property. And that may be all permitted. My question is, when they apply for it, do they specify, in this case, did they specify whether it was these going to be units for purchase or rental? And does that make a difference?
So, I'll double check, but my understanding is that this was proposed as a condominium.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's
Actually, it was a
and
condominium.
That's how it was approved.
Yeah.
I do recall, the applicant stating that he did plan on holding on to some number of the units, so they would still be condos, but he would hold on to them.
Yeah, that's no. I remember, because we talked specifically about whether he would have to register. He has to register with the AG's office for to be a condominium project, and he said yes. And we asked about what the estimated sale price was, and I forget what it was, but it wasn't cheap.
I can reach out to him and double check.
But if they propose it as a condo development, and now, and maybe it's still going to be condos that he's going to hold on to them all and rent them, I just don't know.
I don't know. I'll inquire.
Because it would have made a difference to me if that's what they said up front, and so I don't know if there's anything you can do about that, but maybe an inquiry of the developer, like
I'll inquire
what his intentions are.
Certainly, if he's going to change it from a condominium, then that would have to come back to the board.
That would be a misrepresentation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it would be a change. It would
That'd
be
on the plan. I mean, would you
it was
list that
proposed as a condominium.
Right, so that's why if you look at the plan as approved, if that's, and I think it was on the Facebook page, but that someone had communicated with the developer, and maybe that isn't even true, because you can't believe everything you read on Facebook. But,
I'll check.
It was in the newspaper too.
oh, it is?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
Yeah.
He has presented that to the town.
we send it
He
to,
has presented it to the town.
as a rental project. And who does he present that to? I mean, when you say the town, so,
He was actually working with the assessors.
oh, interesting. Okay. So, yeah, it may be, if it's on the plans, we may need to ask him to come back and
Yeah, if
visit
it's
with
no
us.
longer going to be a condominium, then at least my view is that would be a change.
Yeah. Okay.
Very good. Okay. I did have a question, something that came up at the Conservation Commission meeting, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, Jay. Manufactured homes, if they own that parcel and they're going to be renting out those units, does the owner have to pay, what is it?
Land use change tax?
Land use change tax. Does that come into play with manufactured homes?
Well, I would think it would, because the land use is changing.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it matters whether it's a leasehold or a lot that's sold. They're
Didn't
going
know if, because it was a manufactured project,
Not in current use.
it wouldn't be in current use if it's a manufactured home project.
No, it's not in right now.
It's not in
Oh,
current
it's not in
use,
current use now.
so it's
I
moot.
know, surprised, but.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
If it were, though, I would say, yeah, they would have to pay the land use change tax.
That's what I thought. All right. That was one of the questions that the Conservation Commission had. I was curious. And I didn't know the answer, so.
No additional revenue.
Okay. I guess that's it for that. Okay. I don't have any other business this evening. Anyone have anything else that they want to?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? You want to talk about firearms? All those in favor of the motion to adjourn, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, abstained, motion passes 5-0-0. Thank you for joining us this evening, and we will see you in February. Have a good night. Thank you.
February already. I'll come sign reports.